Hello and welcome once again to Crazy Comics and Stories. It's me, your charming and delightful old Uncle Rat Bastard. And at the other end of the series of tubes and wires that we call the internets is Joe, Crazy Writer. How you doing today, Joe?
I'm a little down today. I was walking around outside, going to drop my eBay stuff out, and I yelled "cow" at a woman on a bike. She gave me the finger, and she plowed her bike right into the cow. I tried.
Well, the crickets like that one.
Well, good. I'd like to make sure they're alive. After all the shenanigans you've been writing about, would you have 2 days of tree torture?
We will get to that when we get to freaking and geeking. But, oh, man. And during I had a whole bunch of trainings and meetings. So in them, I'm saying, can you hear the noise outside? And they would say no.
Good.
So I'm the only one who had to put up with it.
I know. I didn't even hear it.
Yeah. Well, they're gone now. Which is good.
Which is also good. I mean, if you've ever watched Lord of the Rings, you don't want those Ents just suddenly walking around your place.
I don't know. I'm nice to the Ents.
I don't think they even care.
There is that. And, let's face it. There is unrest in the forest. There's trouble with the trees because the maples want more sunlight and the oaks ignore their pleas.
Okay, we haven't been sued yet by the Russia state. Okay, we're doing good. Doing good.
One of the things that we've been trying to do now for 3 months is reviews.
3 months. Yep.
By the way, this is episode 601. I haven't done this in a while. What TV shows have we outpaced? We've lasted a long time, Joe.
That's okay. We have lots of questions we probably never answered put through past episodes.
Well, that's the plan anyway.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we never, ever figure out what the hell we're doing.
That is true.
The list is gone from the internet. There used to be a list that grouped them by, 100 to 300, 300 to 500, and on and on and on. But it's gone now.
Damn.
The internet has failed me.
Let's blame Musk.
Let's blame Canada.
He never even bothered to ask if we wanted to pay $8 for a blue check mark.
Oh, he asked me, and I ignored it.
We're just not that. Oh, I guess you got asked. I'm not that important.
Well, the thing is, come on. If you look on Twitter right now, the only people who have bought the blue check mark are right-wing wackos.
Come on.
Who have like 75 followers.
Come on.
And they're all bitching that, hey, these celebrities don't want to pay $8 for their... Yeah, because the blue check mark used to mean you are who you say you are. It was a way so that you knew if the New York Times tweeted something, it was the actual New York Times instead of, some Yahoo who, I'm going to use the name the New York Times. And they already had problems with that because when they tested, that you could buy your check mark, there was some guy who basically bought a check mark for a company name and tweeted out that, from now on, all our products will be $5 instead of hundreds of dollars. And the stock tanked. And the company, I don't remember what company it is, but they threatened to sue Elon Musk for the problem, saying, hey, you and your mismanagement caused our stock to tumble. And they settled out of court very quietly.
Mm-hmm. That seems to be a popular theme.
Well, you usually settle out of court when you have cases like that.
Oh, yeah.
Most cases settle out of court. So that's not what we're here to talk about, and I'll be editing 90% of that out.
Yes, I was going to suggest that.
Because it was a rabbit hole that we did not...
No, we don't
I
go there.
missed that. I'm going to have to look for that because I miss being able to say, oh, we've outlasted Married with Children. We've outlasted this. We've outlasted that. So reviews, Joe. Have you been reading any funny books?
I have.
And would you like to review one?
Yeah, I got a few lined up. I'm gonna start with one that you recommended, and I found it an utter delight. And I'm gonna call it It's Jeff. This is from Marvel Comics. And is this all from the web site?
It's from the Marvel Unlimited. They have the digital comics on Marvel Unlimited, and then some of them they are printing digitally.
Oh, this was just a blast. I mean, just so silly, so fun, and it's like Jeff just there's no explanation. Jeff is basically I don't know what you call him, a baby shark for better sense, and he just wanders through the Marvel universe, and everybody reacts for him in one of two ways: either utter abject horror, especially in the water, or they love him. You know, it's kind of like when I'm just looking at one now. It's pool party. So a big party going on. Jeff's all excited. That's the best part. He's all excited. Rumbles past. Well, it's got to be Miles Morales, Squirrel Girl, Ms. Marvel, Captain America. He gets in the pool. He's swimming around. He's having a great time, doing a solemn between people. And when he looks up, everybody is out of the water, including the Hulk and that devil dinosaur, utterly terrified of him. And what's funny is you go from, his absolute joy to absolute awe, which just brings a smile to my face. I mean, if you watch me watch this, I was just an idiot smiling. The next one is Shark Cycle, where he's inside the washing machine and the person's like, oh my gosh. Oh, no. Jeff's having a great time spinning round and round and round in the washing machine. It's a one shot as far as I know, $5.99, all ages. You could give this to anybody, which is increasingly rare. If I ordered this for a comic store, I would definitely pick up more and more and try to keep it on the shelf indefinitely, as long as it's in print. I went with the Jaws variant cover where it's actually reverse. Here you got Submariner riding a rubber ducky, and there's Jeff coming down. Now, you read this as well, too, didn't you?
Yes, I've been reading it on Marvel Unlimited.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't do Marvel Unlimited yet. I should. I actually had an account, but I didn't. It got canceled when TCF switched to Huntington and Bake, and I never really started up again. How would you sell this to somebody?
This is a comedy series set in the Marvel Universe.
It kind of reminds me, there was one manga one, and of course in my vast accumulation of crap, about a cat doing the same thing in manga style, just wandering through the Marvel Universe, reacting like a cat would. And it just reminds me a lot of It's Jeff. And of course, the cat one's probably more plausible because, well, then again, it is Marvel Universe. Who's the lady in purple supposed to be? She shows up occasionally reacting to things. She's the one who accidentally put Jeff in the... Is that Katie? Oh, must be.
Yes, it's Hawkeye.
Okay, yeah, because I see there's a panel now where... yeah, Jeff, it's called Thief for Justice. Let's see. Captain America can't find his shield. Hawkeye can't find her arrows. A mask is missing. Eye of Amagado. Falcon's wings. They all blame Deadpool, but it's not. It's Jeff. Yeah, I recommend picking this thing up. It's just a blast. I bought it, obviously. On our scale of buy, borrow, or ignore, I definitely say buy, because this was just a breath of fresh air. And believe me, with all the shit I got going on in my life, it was so much fun to sit down and just read a comic that had no tight continuity, or I had to remember and I couldn't remember, or I was like, did I read the last issue? And I'm sure, like I said, if people watching me read, there's me just sitting in the back, flipping through the book with a dopey grin on my face because it's that type of book. So pick it up. I didn't even see. Is there a creator involved with this?
Yeah, I don't
There
know
we
who
go.
it is,
Kelly
but
Thompson and Kara. So well done. So pick it up either that way or, like Cory said, pick it up Marvel Unlimited. What you got up for us first, Cory?
I have finally gotten all 8 issues of 8 Billion Genies by Charles Soule and Ryan Brown. It is from Image Comics. The premise is that when Earth reaches a population of 8 billion humans, every human is given a genie and they are given one wish. So what would you do if you had a wish? Well, that's what this series is about. It starts, the first issue is the first minute afterward, then the first hour, then the first day, and on and on and on, up until they get to, what is it, 800 years or 8,000 years? One of the two. And we follow a series of characters, some of whom fade out, some of whom stay around, some of whom use their wishes, some of whom don't. And the thing that got me as it went on was it starts off with that very simple premise. But then it starts building a mythology around it. And without a lot of information dumping, which I could see this sort of story doing. Instead, it's okay, we're going to tell you more about the background. We're going to give you more about the genies. We're going to give you more about the people who are around. And it reads like a novel. Most comics read like a short story. They come in, they hit real fast. We've got a plot, we're going to tell that plot. We don't wander off from the plot because we don't have a lot of pages. But this very much sets up this premise and then plays with it and moves around through it. And it's very clever and very well written. And in very short bursts, it creates characters that are very memorable. One of the things that I really liked about this is that Charles Soule, who worked over at Marvel, he did a run on Daredevil. He's a lawyer, but this is nothing like his run on Daredevil, other than every character in the book wants something. And that seems, if you're a writer, you're told every character wants something, even if it's just a glass of water. But a lot of comics that I read that try to have that bigger world, characters only exist to sort of drive the plot. And instead, the characters move the story until we start finding out more of the mythology and more of the deeper things that are going on. And it doesn't feel like a puzzle until you get, I would say, toward the final third, where it's like, oh my gosh, it's been this puzzle all along. It's very clever. It's very well written. I do like the art. The art is done the human characters are done very kind of sketchy, but the backgrounds and everything are very, I want to say, they're more evocative than realistic. This is a book that's drawn and looks like it's drawn. You can feel the artists. You can feel how the artist is telling the story because he's not going for over realistic. He's not going for animated. He's going for a very specific style that's kind of sketchy and kind of robust in how it tells the story. The genies are also, many of them have their own personalities as well, and they have specific rules they have to follow. So in some ways, it's a little like Isaac Asimov when he did his robot stories, in that here are the 3 laws of robotics, and the stories are all going to be around how those laws interact with people. This was very much, we're setting up a situation, and it's all about how the people inside react to the situation. It's 8 issues. It's going to be available as a trade paperback. This is a big thumbs up, this is a buy. I was charmed by it. And I don't want it to seem like it's very twee. There are areas of it that are very dark. There are areas of it that are very thought-provoking. But in the end, it has this, the ending works. I've read a lot of things where people come up with the premise like this and they don't know what to do with it. It's very clear that Sewell had the ending in mind when he thought up the idea, and everything drives toward that, which is something that I appreciate. Again, this gets a buy. It's one of those books that I will go back to and read every so often because it's just so well done. Joe, I believe you were reading it too.
Yes, I will give it a thumbs up. It's one of those few miniseries where I read it as it went along, and I could not wait for the next issue. A lot of times with miniseries, I just wait till like all 4 or 6 or 8 are out and read it all at once, because I figure that's a lot of times how they're meant to be read, beginning, middle, end, basic storytelling. But yeah, this is definitely, if you haven't been picking this one up as comic book, pick it up definitely as a book. You'll well worth your read.
Joe?
My next one, another miniseries, Avengers War Across Time. Paul Levitz, Alan Davis. I'm not, again, it's, you go back, takes place right after Avengers 11, the original one, way back in the 60s, which is interesting because it's one of the first comics I actually bought as a back issue for $10, mainly because it had Spider-Man in it. And boy, don't I wish I kept it. But that's a different subject. Basically, it starts out the Avengers come back. If it's a war across time, you find out pretty quickly that Kang's involved. This is the Kang around Avengers 11, not I call him the cool Kang, which I talked about a couple podcasts back when I read that Kang collected book. Not sure if I can find it. I've been moving my stuff around, which I'll talk about in Geeking, but it must be upstairs. Anyways, it just came out, and it's got early Kang appearances and some of the later ones where time travel is a little bit more thought of. This actually has a pretty good 60s vibe in terms of time travel. It's very, very linear. One of the problems with Kang is being a time traveler is, and I think it actually got spoken in one of the an Avenger comic. I don't know, an older one, but it's like, for all we know, Kang's going to attack us again, and we're just going to fight this battle over and over. Kang, when we see him, is fuming. Oh, spoiler for Avengers 11, because when the Avengers go down, where the hell did they go in 11? South America somewhere. They destroy a Spider-Man robot. And in a different comic, not tied to this one, I explain how Spider-Man went from New York City to get down there to help them. But Kang is, of course, upset. He's worried he can't fail. And he starts by sending the Hulk against the Avengers. And this, Alan Davis's art is fantastic. There's nothing else to be said. I'm just flipping through here, just enjoying the living heck out of re-looking at everything again. The characters are written very well. They're from the 60s, so they're not as coordinated. Nobody knows Tony Stark is Iron Man. I don't know. I'm trying to look to see how many issues of this it's going to be. I know I've read issue 2, because in issue 2 they figure, well, we got to go attack Kang because we know who's doing this, and they have to go invade the Baxter building. And I'm enjoying this. I'm always a sucker for a good crossover. I got to admit, I'm a little wary of Kang, just because I know he's getting revved up in the movie universe as being the big villain. I feel he's kind of been almost overused, oversaturated in the Marvel universe. But then again, So is Galactus, so is Doctor Doom, so is Magneto. So this isn't really a new use of Kang, but it is kind of neat to go back and get the old type school type comics. I do. I wish I could tell you what issues this is going to be. I want to say it's like 4 or 6. A little more expensive than your normal comic, $5.99, but you're getting a lot inside it. It's not a quick read. I found this as a buy. It's obviously going to be a trade paperback, so if you're not buying the comic, definitely pick up the trade when it comes out. I don't know where Paul's going with this. Listen, I trust in terms of selling it, see where he goes. And just looking at Alan Davis's art again is just a joy. Are you reading this one, Cory, or are you going to wait for the trade?
I'm waiting for the trade. I am really interested in it because this is Paul Levitz's first work for Marvel. And there's no word on if he's going to work for Marvel again. But it's just fascinating to me that here's a guy who was kind of DC's editor-in-chief or head honcho, whatever, for years and years and years. After he was let go, he did a Will Eisner book. And this is his first kind of time dabbling in comics. And like a lot of older creators, he wants to play in the early Marvel universe. A lot of people find the early Marvel universe to be more interesting than now, because now you've got to deal with all of the different crossovers and all the different changes, but they want to play with the toys that they remember.
He's doing a pretty decent job. I did find out this is a 5-issue miniseries, so I know I've read at least 1 and 2 because I get my box day usually only once a month. Number 3 is probably on the shelf as well. And I did find a quote from Paul, because I learned much of my writing craft from the Avengers, and it's been a delight to pay homage to my old friends Stan, Jack, and Don by trying to do something that might have been an extended issue 11.1. We've been cooking this up for a long time, and I hope readers have as much fun with it as I did. And I did. What do you got next for us, Mr. Strode?
My next is a number 1 issue. And it's not really so much a reboot as bringing them back. It is Guardians of the Galaxy number 1. Guardians of the Galaxy was, they had a run with Gary Duggan, and that run ended because one of the weird things is Guardians of the Galaxy makes $1 bajillion every time a movie comes out. But the comic never has done that great. They've done everything they can. They put Brian Michael Bendis on it and it didn't sell. They tied it in with the movie and it didn't sell, et cetera, et cetera. It's one of those things where I don't know what they would need to do for the comic fans to pick it up. I think that Marvel fans are very much okay, if it's not tying in with what's going on Earth, and it's off on its own, it's not as important. Whereas when I read a comic, it's more, is this going to be fun? So we've got a new Guardians of the Galaxy because there's a movie coming out in about a week. It's written by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing, drawn by Kev Walker. Matt Hollingsworth does the colors, and these colors are beautiful. This is a Western. Not only that, this is a spaghetti Western. And when you open it up and look at those first pages, it may as well have been filmed in the Alhambra region of Spain, where they filmed all those spaghetti Westerns with the dusty land and the eroded rock, except it's on an alien world. And the Guardians have come to this planet because something is coming and they need to rescue everyone on the planet. If they don't get them off the planet, they're not going to live. And the story just puts the pedal to the metal. They're We get it feels a lot like the movies in that the snappy dialogue and the cuts between the characters, and while the characters are arguing, they're still working together, and it's the story just speeds up and speeds up and speeds up till you get the big revelation at the end. This is not a happy feel good comic. This is a comic like a spaghetti western in that the heroes are just doing the best they can, and it's not as good as it should be. I think that could be another thing because everybody wants the heroes to win, and the Guardians just kind of they get partial victories. The art, I love this art. I love how the layout is. I love how the colors give it a feel. When you look at this comic, you get a feel for the planet. You can feel the sun baking down on the land. You can feel the alien creatures that are on there. You can feel the slapdash plan as it's put together. This is a wonderfully crafted comic. And it sets up the twist at the end is one of the better twists that a first issue's had in a while. Really, I did not expect to enjoy this comic as much as I did. I had heard on the Marvel Pull List podcast that they really liked it, and they used the term spaghetti western. And you know me, the minute you say spaghetti western, I'm there. And it evokes that feel of that frontier without the heroic element. It's a frontier where people are just trying to make do. They're just trying to survive. The Guardians are just trying to do the best they can. I don't want to give away too much, but not all of your favorite characters are here yet. Some of your favorite characters have changed. And they do bring back characters from the original Guardians of the Galaxy series that was done with Annihilation that kind of have been forgotten over the years, but now they're being brought back. And I really like that they're being brought back because that Guardians book by Abnett and Lanning between Annihilation and the second Annihilation series. That was just a fun book with a lot of really cool characters, and they're getting back to that in this book. This is a buy, although, again, I buy my stuff as trades. This was available on Marvel Unlimited to kind of get people hyped for it. Really enjoyed it. It gets a buy. Joe?
The next one up, since I've done two Marvels, I decided let's do a DC. I went with MultiverAlllsity. Say it, MultiverAlllsity. Harley screws up the DCU. Harley's back in Coney for a long overdue reunion with old friends, old haunts, and an old time machine. A mysterious benefactor has left Harley a time machine, and after giving it about a half a second of thought, she decides to take it for a joyride. What could go wrong, right? Yeah, well, a quick trip can screw up everything. Let's see. Frank Tejera, Logan Farber. I picked a variant cover that has her basically running from everybody in the Marvel Universe. And I can see where this...
Well, hopefully it's the DC Universe since it is Harley Quinn.
Well, you never know. I mean, her and Deadpool do make a hell of a couple in those. But, no, I was just looking at the first page. And, of course, the art's not... Seriously, it doesn't take itself serious. Harley spends half the first couple pages with slobber all over her mouth because she's very, very hungry. And there's a few people in here that I'm not sure who they are. My guess is one of them is, what's that egg thing that attacked Wonder Woman? Egg Foo Young or whatever?
Egg Foo!
Egg Foo, yeah. Well, he's, I'm assuming that's him floating around because I don't know half the people that Harley hangs with. Then again, I don't know half the people my daughters hang with. But when she gets the time machine, the Wayback Booth, she just disappears. And then, of course, right away, everything starts going to hell, as you would imagine. I believe this is a 6-issue miniseries. I've just enjoyed the first couple issues. It's just been very lighthearted romp. Whatever she screws up, Who knows? They might not even put it back. You never know. Number of variant covers. One of the cooler ones, but unfortunately it was a 1 in 50, was the, I don't know what you would call it, spoof, swipe, homage of the Flash 123, where the two Flashes are running and Harley basically is taking out the guy in trouble with their big mallet. You could probably go. I'm sorry, I'm as a page through here, I get distracted. But so Harley shows up, and we recognize it as Starro. But she's like, "Is this starfish some kind of weird new Coney fashion statement I ain't heard about?" She pokes it in the eye. Person who has it pokes her in the eye. Ah! And then, of course, promptly smashes her in the face. So yeah, you're going to have some fun with this series. And of course, that's the first two I've done. I've used the word fun. And for me, that's usually a death knell. I remember when I used to have my comic store, I'd say, yeah, this is a fun series. Oh, I don't want it. It's like, really, you can't just have fun with the series? I mean, Jeff is just wildly amazing. Avengers is a great throwback with two masters doing it. Harley's kind of the same way. You know, I don't read Harley Quinn normally. I figured for this miniseries, I'd jump in and just see where it's going. Plus, I like a good screw up. And not only is Harley screwing up, but it's fun to see what she's going to do at the DCU. With the MultiverAlllsity, she may just leave it there. You never know. There's no guarantee she's going to change it back. This is comics, you know. Little expensive. Let's see, mine was $4.99. Variants go upwards $5.99, unless you want to get that 1 in 50 one I was talking about. It's going to be a trade. You know, I compare this to what I got in Avengers War Across Time, and I compare it to what I got in Jeff. It's not as good a deal as the other two. So I would say, unless you're like me and I'm already committed to buying it, I'd wait maybe for the trade. But I definitely would pick this up. I'd say borrow if you can. Of course, only 2 issues are out, so not really much to borrow. Or just wait for that trade. Get it from the library. I cannot see this being one I would reread or that I'll probably hang on to. But I'm on board. I'm going to stick it out to the end. Are you on this one, Cory?
That's one I will be reading when it hits DC Universe's app.
Okay. How about you? What you got next?
I have an Image book.
Ooh.
It's one that I highlighted in previews. Terrorwar. It is written by Saladin Ahmed, who I've read his Black Bolt series, and then he did a wonderful run on Miles Morales' Spider-Man. Pencils by Dave Acosta. It is a science fiction series, and the premise is that it's kind of set in a Blade Runner-esque world where, you know, the rich are far above everybody, the poor are down in very crowded areas, but every so often the terror of the people in the crowded areas coalesces into a monster, and our main character is one of the guys who kills the monsters. So we are thrown right into the premise on the first few pages. They introduce the world. They have him fight one of the terror monsters. Then he goes to his job where he has a group of people, and they are bounty hunters for these monsters. This is very much a setup issue. I like the art. The art handles the city very well, giving it a very cramped, claustrophobic, used look. It's not overly rendered in that one of the problems with a lot of series like this, they feel the need to, draw tons of lines and everything to give it that feel. But instead, what the artist does is he kind of crams the architecture together to give it that feel. And the characters are all very loosely rendered. They seem very mobile. They have very unique styles of dress because it's the future and he can get away with that. He does a really good job of introducing us to these characters, to the world, to how it works. But that's really all this issue is. I'm not going to say that it's padded, because it's not. And it's also not stretched out and takes longer. This is a good first issue. And at this point, I'm in a borrow mode, because all they've really done is set up the world, set up the situation. We don't know enough about the characters. We don't know enough about what our story will be. We don't know if it's going to be a monster of the month or if there's something more there. So this is one that I should have waited and bought the first trade, because I have a feeling that if it's going to be a series, the trade would be far more indicative. But for a first issue, I thought it was a well-done introduction. So for me, this gets a borrow, and I will revisit it when the first story arc ends with issue 5 or 6. Joe?
Speaking of revisiting, I cracked open my 0 Hour Crisis in Time omnibus. 0 Hour, for those of you who have never read it, occurred in 1994, about a little under 10 years from when Crisis on Infinite Earths dropped. The reason why that's important is because this was to tie up a lot of loose ends that were caused by the Crisis on Infinite Earths storyline. The adventure begins as a massive crisis in time is causing Earth's time-space continuum to go haywire. All of Earth's superheroes are called in to help, including the original Justice Society and other older characters that were around at the time of 1994. Turns out that Hal Jordan, the Silver Age Green Lantern, is trying to undo the event that eventually led to his breakdown and destruction of Coast City. Now, as Parallax, he fights the entire DC hero inventory. As a result of this series, DC's many Hawkmen were merged into one. The Justice Society, excluding Spectre, were killed. Batgirl was returned to Gotham. Original Flash, Green Lantern were retired. It didn't matter now, but it was written by Dan Jurgens at top of his form. The main series was drawn by him, and of course it crosses over into other books as well. Almost anything going on. See, Action, Adventures of Superman, Anima, you remember that. Batman, Shadow of the Bat, Catwoman, Damage, Darkstar, Detective, Flash, Green Arrow, Green Lantern, Guy Gardner, Warrior, Hawkman, Justice League America, Justice League International, Justice League Task Force, Legion 94, Legionnaires, Legion of Superheroes, Outsiders, Robin, Steel, Superboy, Superman, Superman, Man of Steel, Team Titans, that is, Valor, and of course 0 Hour, which had a countdown 4 to 0. And then we also showcase 94 had stories in it. One of the most exciting things is it was a forward by Dan Jurgens. I love this type of stuff where they talk about what the thinking was and the meetings and the planning to get the 0 Hour to go. One of the things in Crisis that Cory and I have talked about in the past is that it really didn't, it should have started with everything in the DC universe, starting with number 1. Instead, some books were unaffected. Wonder Woman disappeared. And then there was a Tina Roberts series. I can't remember. Kind of I think, didn't at the time, was DC still bound? They had to have a monthly Wonder Woman book or they lost the rights?
Up until Crisis. And then when Wonder Woman was canceled, they bought the rights outright.
Okay, that's where it was.
And then Trini Robbins and Kurt Busiek did a 4-issue series. But by the time that 4-issue series was out, they'd already taken care of that because George Perez was unbelievably running late on the first issue.
Shocked, I tell you, George. So, yeah, I'm looking at this as a lot of nostalgia. I'm also looking at as someone who, if you've never read it, is it worth going back picking it up? Now, I also had a sidebar issue because the omnibus itself is out of print, as DC's want to do, and going for, well, not silly money, still running about $350, which, considering I paid probably $75 through this, I had to stop and think, do I want to read this? Because I could go find the trade paperback. Hell, I could find the issues for a lot less, and $350 sit in my pocket especially with con season and free comic book day right around the corner. However, I opened it because I'm like, that's what I bought the damn thing for, because I wanted it all at once. I'm only about a third into it. It does not hold up well. A lot of the stories, well, basically what happens is it's like, I'm reading Darkstar. They're out fighting their big villain, and then what happens is people start disappearing and reappearing because time's going wonky. So there's all these little time clues that are going in. Superman, back from the dead, is wearing his long-haired hippie hair, so you might look at that and go, whoa, that's weird. But again, this was 94. If you remember 93, Superman died. Well, 92, he died. Batman got his back broken. There was all sorts of weird stuff going on in the DC universe that were actually getting people's attention. But as a standalone, unless you have the nostalgia going on, or you were reading comics at this time, I don't know if this is a good way to read this or reread this, because you're not going to really get a lot of it. Even for Darkstar, I didn't read Darkstars. What I did in order, I guess, to keep my brain from going, okay, I'm going to stop and go look up somewhere and see what the hell was going on. If it doesn't relate to 0 Hour, I just kind of flipped over it. Sometimes I had to be confused, because when you started on Green Lantern number 55, Cory, do you remember what happened in Green Lantern 54? I'll give you a hint. No, go ahead.
54. I know that Kyle got the ring at the end of 50. Was 54 the woman in the refrigerator?
Yeah, because it starts out 55 is Major Damage and him are in just a kick-ass fight. No hard barred. And basically, Major pushed Sky Gardner too far. He basically puts him in what we would know as an electric chair and starts torturing him, trying to figure out what's going on. And then, of course, the Los Angeles Special Crimes Unit puts a gun to Kyle's head and tells him, okay, just back away, son. I'm only going to ask you one more, back away. Really? I would, of course, this is a new Kyle. You would think he'd have 27 different ways to stop him, not to mention the ring traditionally would protect the Green Lantern. Although this is a new ring, I don't remember if Kyle realizes at the time he's immune to yellow. Anyway, somebody decides to pull Major Damage's ass out of the fan and blah, blah, blah. And then Alan Scott shows up. And if you don't know who Alan Scott is, I don't even know you. And, well, let's just put it this way. Kyle didn't know who Alan Scott was. And then he gets a quick rundown on who the Green Lanterns were. A really beautiful spread of almost everybody and a quick run up to Parallax. And Metron's running around. Darkseid's not getting involved. And I remember the 0 Hour books themselves will probably be most remembered as I'm reading this. The omnibus, again, this is the 25th anniversary omnibus. So even if they reprint it, not likely, it's still going to have the 25th anniversary thing to it. I'm having a fun time reading what I remember, but so much of this I didn't read. And unlike some of the newer ones, like I've talked about War of the Realms, the Thor big crossover, when I was reading it, I didn't know what the hell was going on. But when I went back and I read Thor, and then I started reading the crossovers, okay, I get the idea that this is a war. I remember when Zero came out, I loved Crisis. I loved 0 Hour. If you have to read this, first of all, good luck finding the omnibus because it's expensive as heck. You could probably find a trade for a lot less, and you can probably find the issues for even lesser. Because I don't think, I'm just looking, there is not a major character that pops up in any of these. So you should be able to find them for like maybe $1 a piece somewhere. And when you read them, remember, you go from 4 to 0. And again, with New 52, all these retrofits, it's irrelevant anyways. So while I'm having a fun time reading this, if I could go back, I would tell myself, yeah, Joe, don't bother picking it up. I would definitely, if you're like me and you've been around and you read it at one time, go borrow it or dig it out of your collection, read it. If you're just a current guy, you jumped on board with DC, New 52, don't bother. I mean, again, if you're digging through the dollar boxes and you find them, pick them up. I bought it, but I would say borrow or ignore, depending on where you fall. If you're a newer person or if you're an old fart like Cory and I who, yeah, I think I'll read this, see if it holds up. No, the only thing worse than this is DC versus Marvel. And I'll get to that when I read it.
I remember at the time, the way they pitched it to us was, okay, we got a lot of stuff wrong after Crisis. 0 Hour's going to fix it. And instead, a lot of the stuff they did in 0 Hour really messed things up. It screwed up the Legion of Superheroes yet again. The Legion, after Crisis, the Legion just kept taking hit after hit after hit.
Yeah.
Where it's, okay, we're pulling Superboy so that all the stories with Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes, well, they didn't happen, and we've got to do something to some big convoluted bullshit explanation to fix that. When all they needed to say was, well, we don't know what's going to happen between now and 1,000 years from now. All of the Supergirl stuff, they had to fix that too. After 5 years later, the sales kind of took a dive, and they were like, okay, we need to bring back the Happy Legion. So they brought back, and the Legionnaires, are they clones? Are the Legion we've been reading for the past few years clones? And by that point, most people were like, I don't care. I don't care. It's too convoluted. It doesn't make any sense. So then 0 Hour messes things up even more. The next thing they do, the Justice Society, which they had just brought back, are then gotten rid of. And they're gotten rid of in a very disrespectful way.
Yeah, very disrespectful. Yeah.
And these were characters that people loved. And a few years later, Jeff Johns showed that, hey, the Justice Society is something that when it's done right, people will really want to buy it. But it was like, they're old.
Yeah.
They're old, they're gone. Goodbye. They tried fixing Hawkman, and there were a lot of reasons why Hawkman was a mess. And the fix didn't last because people just kept pulling at the strings. And then the big thing that really made me mad was I was already upset that they'd turned Hal Jordan into a villain. So in this story, they started doing something where he said, look, I can fix things. I can make things right. And he points out how, I'm going to fix stuff. And people are like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. We want everything to be all messed up. Thankfully, Hal Jordan went out. It was final night. He went out saving everybody. Yeah. But in this one, it was, okay, we're going to make Hal Jordan a hero again. Psych! Which they'd already done at least once in Green Lantern. And they did another time in Green Lantern. And it pissed me off, not as much as a lot of people were, but it was like, okay, doing the story where Green Lantern's, Hal Jordan's going to be good again. Oh, sorry, no, he's not. One time you get away with it. By the third time and the second time and the fourth time, it's like, no, now you're just being jerks. So 0 Hour left a really bad taste in my mouth. The thing I did like about it were the Zero issues, because a lot of them were well-told stories. And the whole idea of we're going to fix Crisis, no, they didn't. They made some changes around the edges, but the books that did best around the whole, quote, fixing Crisis, unquote, were the ones who said, yeah, we're not going to bother with that. We're just going to tell good stories.
So you're saying ignore it.
I'm saying borrow if you have nostalgia.
Yeah.
But at the time, I didn't like it. When I reread it, I still had all those same feelings of this is just a poorly planned and poorly executed thing that's not giving people what they promised.
I will recommend, though, if especially you Legion fans, go find Final Crisis. What was the name of the crossover they did?
Legion of Three Worlds.
Yes, that was phenomenally done.
Yes, with
And you also see
excellent art.
A little bit of what Cory talks about is touched upon in the wonderful JLA Avengers crossover, where even the heroes look at is what? So, but yeah, it's I think what I said stands. If you're like me and you've read it and you have nostalgia, check it out. Dig your issues out if you have them. For those kiddies who just jumped on board or have no idea what Uncle Joe and Cory have been talking about for the last 10, 15 minutes, ignore it. It didn't matter. It all went away. What do you got for us next?
My last book is another nostalgia trip, and it is a sequel to a previous nostalgia trip. It is Warlock Rebirth, #1, written by Ron Marz, drawn by Ron Lim. It is actually set back in the Infinity Watch era, because it opens up with the son of Captain Marvel, who was called Legacy.
I'm going to tune out because I haven't read this yet, and I don't want any surprises.
I'm not going to spoil anything.
I know, but you've already told me too much that I wanted to know. So I'm just I'm going to sit and hum with my quietly on mute.
So the art by Joe, you're not on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The art by Ron Lim, it's really clear to me that he just did layouts and the inker Don Ho did it, because one of the things I like about Ron Lim's art is it's very clean, it's very precise, and this is a little sketchier, a little rougher around the edges. So to me, it was pretty clear that it's got Don Ho is doing his own inking. I don't know if I like the inks over Ron Lim, because one of the things I like about Ron Lim is that his stuff really comes from the school of the George Perez art, where, very precise lines, very, very detailed stuff, not a lot of sketchiness to it. This feels more sketchy. It is a continuity implant. It all takes place on Monster Island. The first half of the book is very much just, here we are, we're on Monster Island, here's Legacy, and then they introduce Gamora and Pip the Troll. We don't even see Warlock till halfway through. It's not really a rebirth sort of thing. It's more feels like it's just, okay, this is a story we would have told back then. It did not jump out at me as a must read. It did sort of strike me as, okay, Ron Marz and Ron Lim are going to do another nostalgia book. And that's okay if you are someone who wants to see that nostalgia book. But I think for a new reader, there is no introductory page that tells you, okay, this is set here. It's very much we're just throwing you in. And if you remember this stuff, cool. And if you don't, sorry. So while it's a really good nostalgia pop, I can't recommend it to anybody except for people who read Warlock and the Infinity Watch back in the 90s. We do get some Marvel Monsters. I'm always happy to see Marvel Monsters. We do get a new character, which I think is an interesting continuity implant. But at the end of the day, the audience for this is limited, and I got to give it a borrow. Joe?
The last book for me. Oh, wait, are we going on?
Well, if you want to give another book, that's fine, but you started.
Oh, okay.
So
well, no, I'll save it.
An extra book.
I'll say, okay, well, actually, never mind. I talked about this book already, so forget about it. Forget it. Besides, I'd like to hear about these guys, our sponsors.
Our newest sponsor is NordVPN. Let's be honest, if you're out on the internet, you need a VPN to protect you. There's all sorts of things going on the internet where people can track you. You could accidentally download a keylogger, all sorts of things. NordVPN gives the best security possible. It has a password manager which generates complex passwords, syncs across all your devices, stores your notes and credit card information. It also gives you 10 gigabytes of private cloud storage, secure files. It backs up your data automatically. But the main thing it gives you is peace of mind. It gives you peace of mind when you're out on the internet, when you're streaming, when you're playing games, when you're listening to podcasts like this one. It gives you safety anywhere at any time. It protects your online activity. You get full access to all content. And if you use the link go.nordvpn.net sh3ku, it'll take you to where you can get a great deal for a 1-month plan, a 2-year plan, a 1-year plan. They are our newest sponsor. We're happy to have them. And if you would like to sponsor something here at any of the podcasts on the Solitaire Rose Network, you can. Just email me, solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com. Thanks. And how about all the other podcasts I do? The Solitaire Rose Radio Network is currently on a pause, basically because COVID-19 has made it so that I have to work a lot of extra hours at both jobs. But you can still go and listen to my other podcasts. Now, you're probably listening to Crazy Comics and Stories, which is the main podcast. But on this same feed, KRAYZCOMIX, is Solitaire Rose Radio, the solo radio podcast that I do. I've done interviews, I've done short stories, I've done all sorts of things, and you can get to it right here on this same feed. I also do a podcast called Novelcast, where I take the novels I've written and turn them into free audiobooks. That's over at novels.solitairerose.com. Dangerous Dan Moore and I, and of course Wolfie B. Bad, give you bad advice over at badadvice.solitairerose.com. You send in your questions, and we give you the aforementioned bad advice. And then myself and Adam Vermillion from For the Love of Comics do the Fantastic Forecast at fantasticforecast.solitairerose.com, where we go through the issues of the Fantastic Four, 4 issues at a time, to give the plot and commentary on each issue. That's not all. Yes, I'm crazy. I still, over at pwinsiderelite.com, every week on Wednesday, do a recap of the latest episode of AEW Dynamite. I write up what happened, and then myself and Anthony Pyrus will do an audio. Now, you can only listen to the audio, if you remember, at pwinsiderelite.com, and if you're a wrestling fan, you should be, where we then break down the episode, talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, give it a grade, and let you know if you should have watched that episode. Those are the other podcasts here at the Solitaire Rose Radio Network. Thanks. And now it's time for another review, Joe.
All right.
This is Retro Reviews. Joe,
Yay.
do you have a
All
retro
right.
review?
I does. So we are going way back to 1945, January. I have here in my grease-free hands a fairly water-damaged copy of Captain Marvel Adventures number 42. Largest circulation of any comic magazine. It says so in the little circlet ball. The reason why I picked this up is 2. First of all, it's a Christmas cover, because, you know, for a while there, I've been collecting Christmas covers till I discovered I have 2 long boxes of Christmas comics, and I've decided to stop collecting them. This, however, I have a second reason to buy, because in the bottom corner it says Captain Marvel in St. Paul, Minnesota. That's where I live. So let's crack this cover open. Right away on the insides, we find out that Milton likes milk on his Wheaties, as some army guys are bending over a palm tree to get coconuts, because It's a dish you'll like too. Milk, fruit, and Wheaties. Breakfast of champions with milk and fruit, a product of General Mills. Wheaties and Breakfast of Champions are registered trademarks of General Mills. Probably still are, so you don't really want to push it. But remember, this was going on during World War II, so there's a lot of war references and stuff in this. The first page has a quick summary of Captain Marvel. This is the classic Captain Marvel because it gets all the powers of the greatest men in history. S for Solomon, wisdom. Hercules, H, strength. A, Atlas, stamina. Z, Zeus, power. H, Achilles, courage. M, Mercury, speed. In the hands of boy reporter Billy Batson, when he pronounces the name of the ancient wizard Shazam, he becomes, in a blinding flash of lightning, the mighty Captain Marvel. Here we've got all the information. Chief artist C.C. Beck, editorial advisor board of Professor H.W. Zorbog, director of Clinic for Gifted Children, New York City. Dr. Ernest G. Osborne, professor of education and executive officer, Community Center, Teacher College, Columbia University. Rear Admiral E. Byrd, noted explorer and aviator and author. Major L. Williams, famous flyer and author. These are to help us maintain the high standards of wholesome entertainment. In our comic publication, we have enlisted the aid of distinguished individuals whose names are given above. This is from W.H. Fawcett, Jr., who's the president. It's got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories. I'll probably go in a little bit more in the one Captain Marvel. There's added attractions of Dopey Danny D, Captain Kidd plus 30 Fathom Courage, a bang-up story. Little tiny stamp in the, I'm just on the first page here, folks. The For Victory by United States Bonds and Stamps. And order in advance. We are trying to cooperate 100% in the war effort. With this aim in view and due to paper shortage, we are cutting down on the number of copies of each magazine printed. Therefore, we suggest that you ask your news dealer to reserve your copy of your favorite comics just to make sure he is all sold out when you get to the stand. Then it also goes on, if it's not there the day we announce, could we be, remember, transportation difficulties. Every now and then a magazine will be late, even though we do our best to avoid it. And I'm going to put on my readers here because let's see if there's anything information in the Inca there. Published 11 times a year. Subscription rate for 12 issues is $1.20. For foreign issues, $2. And all sorts of other fun things, officers and things like that. So just all sorts of interesting good. We're already 2 issues in, and we've had 1, 2, 3, reminders of the war. So here we go. The main attraction, Captain Marvel in St. Paul, Minnesota. There's a question. Let's see. Captain Marvel comes bursting in. Oh, Captain Marvel, what are you going to do to me? There's the answer to your question right on the screen, Mr. Slick Focus. The future camera never lies. And down low, Billy, of course, does the narrating for every story because he's talking into his whiz microphone. Folks, have you ever known events were going to happen before they really do? Well, before you say it's impossible, you better read what happened to Captain Marvel in one of America's greatest cities, St. Paul, Minnesota. And the gist of the story is basically when they get to Minneapolis, he stops off, first of all, looks at Union Station, which is actually still around downtown St. Paul right now. He says hello to Mayor Johnny McDowell, shakes hand with Jenny Carlson, owner of the St. Paul News Agency. Brooks Henderson, radio announcer of KSTP, has Billy on the air by 11:05 and a half. And of course, when he gets the Pioneer Press or Dispatch, because we had 2 papers back then, it's pictures of Captain Marvel visiting St. Paul. And Billy's like, Captain Marvel isn't here yet. And sure enough, there's pictures of him standing in front of Union Depot. So naturally, Billy goes out to figure it out. There's a couple shots of, it's very, very small print. Let's see if I can make it out. Golden Rule, which again is a timepiece that must have been on 7th Avenue. 7th Avenue is a street where the Emporium was, which is a movie theater that I believe is still standing. Now it's closed off as a pedestrian mall. They talk about there's a lot of old pictures as the news guys talking to George Hammond about his invention, and I imagine these are people in St. Paul history. They discover that George has actually made a device that allows him to take pictures of things that will show where Captain Marvel is going to be in the future. There's a shot of them taking pictures of the St. Paul Cathedral. There's a shot of Captain Marvel in front of the St. Paul Capitol. There's a shot of him at the Super Speedway, which is in the Minnesota State Fair. As the story goes on, what happens is that Slick Focus, the gent who invented this camera, decides he's going to rob things because he'll know exactly where Captain Marvel is. So Captain Marvel is there with Vic Cheetah, which is amazing because he's like a major person in town. And Vic explains to George about the future camera. As the Clark Stadium strikes 5, there's a robbery at the First National Bank. Captain Marvel, you have to get over there fast. And of course, he stops everybody involved, including Slick Focus. Why? Well, because Slick didn't look at the rest of the negatives. If he did, he'd have seen that there's a picture of Captain Marvel flying in to stop him. So underneath that is a horrendous stereotype of Hiroshima looking mighty glum because bonds that you are buying will soon make him a bum and send him home a-crying. Buy war bonds and stamps. See, there's a Captain Kidd, which is basically a 6-panel cartoon strip. The obligatory prose piece that allowed him to be sent, I believe, second-class mail.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to see. Somebody named the captain in it. There is the Adventures of RC and Quickie. RC being the mascot for Royal Crown Cola. It's plenty right. It does taste best. Next page is a Captain Marvel what if story. Oh, I gotta go into this one because they ask, a thug asks the guy who created the Professor IQ putter. Let's see. Just suppose the famous Captain Marvel joined the Nazis. And sure enough, as soon as Billy turns into Captain Marvel, he's confronted by a blank piece of paper who he signs at the bottom. And then the guy we talked about earlier who asked the question takes that piece of paper, uses a little invisible ink, and now he has a piece of paper that says, I, Captain Marvel, hereby decree to denounce America and help Hitler. When they confront Captain Marvel about this, he goes, well, I put my signature to this paper, trick or not. I'll have to follow up on it. And he says, Hi, Hitler, Captain Marvel's on our side. And Captain Marvel, Heil Hitler. And almost every other column, he's either, I will do what the Fuhrer wishes me to do. I am his to command. Phooey on America. So he goes to Berlin. And when he gets through the window, of course, the Fuhrer caricature flies under a table. Oh, no, it's Captain Marvel. He goes, forgive me, mein Führer, for this is Captain Marvel has come to pledge allegiance to you in Germany. Heil Hitler, Captain Marvel says. Thank you, my generous Führer. He gets tons of medals from a general nearby. The crowd is happy. Captain Marvel stops an assassination attempt with plenty of Heil Hitler. I wonder what Billy will think of this. Shazam, as he goes back. Well, Billy didn't sign the paper, and he realizes he first of all, he cries. This is terrible. Because he signed the paper, he thinks he has to go through with it, and I can't do a thing myself. And Billy realizes, wait, I'll get that paper and tear it up. Then Captain Marvel will come to a sentence. And sure enough, he's able to do that by sneaking in quickly, grabbing the paper, saying Shazam, which he changes, grabs the paper, rips it up. Oh, wait, what does he do? He does this wrong. He gives the paper to the Fuhrer, and the Fuhrer rips the paper himself, thinking that Marshal Marvel has proven his loyalty to me twice already, so I don't need this paper. I will tear it up myself. And then he's suddenly, in the present time, the idiot who looks back goes, no, don't do that. Hitler tore up the paper. So that's what the professor says, that's what if machine showed, even if Captain Marvel signed your paper and joined the Nazis, Hitler would make a mistake and tear the paper up. And sure enough, Captain Marvel then punches out Hitler, brings him back to America as his prisoner. And the guy who's, still got the professor in chains starts ripping up his paper saying, I got to get out of here. But then the real Captain Marvel shows up, knocks out all the bad guys, releases Professor Io, and the machine blows up. So he's never able to do it again. The end of that is, in union, there's strength. And that's, kids, why I'd like all my fans to join my Captain Marvel club. We're not even halfway through this issue, folks. You got a lot of comic for your 10 cents back then. Let's see. There's another Dopey Danny D, which is just a 6-panel strip. Bolted from Mars, which you read, and it's really cool, but it's actually an ad for Grape Nuts, whole grain flakes. And then you get chapter 21 of the Monster Society of Evil. Cory, tell the folks what Monster Society of Evil was all about.
The Monster Society of Evil was a serial that ran through Captain Marvel comics. I forget how many
I want to say 25.
But it basically was the story of some mastermind named Mr. Mind who was bedeviling Fawcett City. And it was set up like a movie serial. It would always have a cliffhanger in order to get the kids to come back to the next issue. And it lasted over 2 years. And that's where we find out toward the end that Mr. Mind is actually a worm with a speaker around its neck.
Well, by this time, when chapter 21, we're near the end, and we know it. Although I'm not sure if he knows he knows who Mr. Mind is by this time. As a matter of fact, he ends up fighting a creation that Mr. Mind made, which is kind of a dumb dullard because he turned out to be an idiot. So what he did, he sliced off the head. Mr. Mind sliced off the head trying to get rid of his dummy, a dog grew on it. And he used the dog to sniff out where Captain Marvel is. Every time Captain Marvel would pop a head off, 2 more would grow. So it's kind of a Hydra thing. I don't want to leave you in suspense because finding Monster Society of Evil in any form is impossible. But what happens is he finds out that Captain Marvel finds out the heads are hungry, throws some food out, and the heads end up eating each other because no one can destroy the Hydra except itself, and they were way too hungry. He's able to catch Mr. Mind, off to jail worm as he turns into Billy, but then somebody sneaks in through the window, whacks Billy out, ties him up, covers his mouth. What does this new villain want with Mr. Mind and Billy? Don't miss next month's exciting episode. And then, if you did join the Captain Marvel Club, there is a secret code message. Use your code finder to figure it out. Here's another 65 is plenty warm enough for health. Fight fuel waste. Next page is a quick ad for Paper Punch Packs a Punch.
Hold on, before you complete. You know how you said it's hard to find the Monster Society of Evil?
Well,
no, it's not.
Oh, cool.
Our pals at Guandanaland.
Oh, brilliant.
You could go over to Barnes & Noble right now. It is number 1679A. Just put in Monster Society of Evil Special. They have it available there because it is public domain.
Cool. And I imagine they don't edit all the racy goodness out of it? Or badness.
Nope, they just reprint it.
Because that's what kept DC from reprinting it all these years. I've got it in the deluxe edition, which talked about. I've just run across a statement of ownership, and I put it on my cheaters to read it because it's really small. There's no information here about subscription numbers, just that in front of a notary public, they did swear that Gordon Fawcett is the businessman and owner of Fawcett. So that's kind of interesting. You mentioned above it is the Paper Packs a Punch, which is an ad for waste paper needed. Then, because it's a Christmas issue, there's Captain Marvel and the Plot Against Christmas.
Oh, no, it's the War on Christmas.
No, this is just the plot. And don't worry, Captain Marvel's able to defeat it, and Christmas goes on as usual.
Oh, I thought he defeated Christmas.
Oh, a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all. A couple more pages of ads. Let's see. This is one. Premium or cash given. Boys, girls, ladies, send no money now. Send names and address. You send in billfolds, flag sets, fountain pens, blankets, other personal household items that are yours. So this is apparently somebody having you send stuff in to Wilson Chemical Company, Department FC50, Tyrone, Pennsylvania, because they want, obviously, metals, and they pay cash. So that's a different thing. The next page is It's Fun to Draw. For $1, you can get a It's Fun to Draw guide from Knickerbocker Pub Company, Department D, 1704 Greenwich Street in New York. And you can return it and it won't even cost you a penny if you don't want to. You could also send it COD if you want, plus 38 cents for COD postage and money fees. In the inside cover is the Gilbert Hall of Science chemistry set ad, as well as a new Erector set junior. And you can send in and get the free big book of thrilling railroad tales.
I imagine you've been saving your nickels for that.
Well, it's free too, so I could just send it. This all from the AC Gilbert Company. The last back panel for 98 cents, you could get a 10-power telescope. Precision built, makes faraway objects stand out clear, sharp, big as life. But you'd have to clip the coupon. So really, there's a lot of clipping going on in this book. It's a wonder, between the paper shortages, the upcoming Dr. Wortham burning of comics, that any of these issues survive. The one I've got is, like I said, it's seen better days. I can still read it, go through it, look at it. It's a lot of fun. I'm going to be posting some of the St. Paul specific stuff, if not the actual issue, later on. If you recall, I did have a Minneapolis one earlier. I actually ended up selling that because that one was in very nice shape. And after all, I'm more of a St. Paul boy than a Minneapolis boy. Go figure. So there you go, all the way from 1945, Captain Marvel number 42. Cory, what you got for us?
My comic is not that old, but it is old because it comes all the way from 1989.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You are.
Tales Too Terrible to Tell, issue number 1. Tales Too Terrible to Tell was printed by New England Comics, probably only known for The Tick. New England Comics was a comic shop, and The Tick was drawn by Ben Edlund to be kind of their store mascot. Then he did a comic. The comic took off, and New England Comics tried to print other things. One of them was a series called Tales Too Terrible to Tell. I think it lasted about 9 or 10 issues, then morphed into Terrorwar, and then slowly faded away. The comic is a reprint book of 50s horror. So it's a 76-page comic, and at the time it sold for $2.95. The first issue has a Stephen Bissett cover of zombies eating flesh, and it's $30 on eBay, but I think it should be worth more because it has one original story in it, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
A 4-issue story by Ben Edlund of The Tick. And it's a horror story. I have talked a lot about my love of 50s horror comics. This was one of the first ones this was one of the ones I bought where I was finally able to get it without paying for high dollar back issues, because printing public domain stuff wasn't really a big thing in the 80s, because a lot of people were like, well, nobody wants to read old reprints. But New England Comics decided that if they were going to do it, they were going to do it upright. They did a 76-page issue. By the way, the first issue of Tales Too Terrible to Tell is individually numbered. So each issue you got was stamped with its own individual number. I don't know if that had been done before 1989 before. I want to read a little from the beginning. In recent years, researchers have discovered that many titles from the 50s issued by small companies, which have long gone out of business, are now available for reprinting. Modern-day publishers like Eclipse and Eternity have reprinted some of these stories. Eclipse is shot from original art, while Eternity is worked by photographing the original comics. Fortunately, in recent years, the original art for many of these comics has become available, and EC Press has been able to access a number of complete stories that appear in this and future issues of Tales Too Terrible to Tell. If you enjoy the stories found here, check out Eclipse's Seduction of the Innocent and Eternity's 50s Terror. Also, as time went on, Eternity, which was part of Malibu, started reprinting tons and tons and tons of old stuff. To the point where I would say between 1990 and 1992, they published over 100 issues of things that reprinted old comic strips and old comics and stuff that had fallen into public domain. They were practically a factory for that stuff. Then when they started publishing Image, that's when they kind of moved their game up and didn't do any of that anymore and started publishing their own original superheroes. The stories herein, most of which we do not have the artists listed. And for the life of me, most of the art is so, most of these comics are so obscure that I can't figure out who the artists are. They do not list the comic they are originally from, which I think is a shame. They did in later issues, but in the first issue, they did not do that. And I know in later issues, they started talking more about the comics where they came from, and were better at sort of trying to find out who the artists were. But this was a first issue, a first attempt. The stories are mediocre. You've got a vampire story. You've got you've got ghost stories. You've got plain old-fashioned twist-ending horror stories. In the middle, there is a text piece called Terrorwar, which gives starts a history of the pre-code horror books, which there are better histories, but this was very early on. So no one had really put together a good history of non-EC horror. And the other thing I want to point out, at the time when I started reading comics, and by the time I started to learn more about comics outside, when they talked about 50s horror comics, there was EC, and then everything else was utter garbage. I have since learned that that's not true. There was a lot of garbage. There was a lot of stuff shoveled onto the market. But I remember at the time being told, oh, the Atlas horror stuff was all crap. The Avon stuff was all crap. All of it was crap. The Atlas stuff was actually pretty well drawn. There were clunkers here and there. There were stories that were just plain awful. The writing was not up to EC standards because they were cranking out tons and tons of stuff, while EC had 3 bi-monthly horror books. And they were all put together by Al Feldstein, who was a remarkable writer-editor. But there's a lot of stuff that's really good. Don Heck's horror work in the 50s was fantastic. I can see why at Marvel Stan loved to give him work, because when it comes to non-superhero stuff, his stuff is really good and really dramatic and really well done. There's no Kirby, there's no Ditko, because they were not really working in the horror realm during the pre-code era. And these are all pre-code era horror books. Is this worth picking up? At $30 an issue, no. But I think any of the New England comics, Tales Too Terrible to Tell, if you could find them for like $5-10, it's a good package. They put together some good stuff. I would recommend that instead you pick up some Guantanaland stuff, because you're going to get a bigger package. It's going to be all one series. They are able to name the artists. They tell you the comics they're reprinting. But this is a kind of a good way to dip into the 50s horror, pre-code horror stuff. And now we get to my favorite part of the show. No, not where I climb up on the roof and throw ping pong balls on the neighbors.
Yay.
No, it's freaking and geeking. And Joe, we've been going for an hour and a half.
Woohoo.
So let's cut it down to 2 freaking and 2 geeking.
Well, that's easy. I've only got 2 each.
Oh, good.
Health-wise, I'm still battling what got me hospitalized a month ago. Doesn't seem to be as bad, and I don't know if it's because it's fading or I'm just getting used to walking around with it. So a couple weeks I'll go see my final doctor who will either help me or just I got to live with it. I screwed up on the eBays.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I sent someone the wrong book. Fortunately, the gent was in France. So, I get the email where he said, hey, you sent the wrong one. And I realized I sent the wrong one. I think I actually sent him a note saying, oh, my gosh, I sent you the wrong book. Fortunately, eBay helps because he can report that I did. They kind of step in. They prevent bad feedback. They give him a refund, whatever. I posted the right book. I'll send it out tomorrow, which is cool because this person was very understanding. I had to use Google Translate to translate back and forth, but it worked out great. So again, if I mess up, hey, I own it. And I just felt bad because it was overseas type stuff, which is a little different than just, mailing across town. So that's it for me. How about you, Cory? What you freaking on?
I talked a little earlier and you talked a little earlier. They are putting a house next door to me. And in doing so, they have cut down the trees.
Oh.
So for the last 2 days, well, on Monday, it was, they're cutting down the trees and they would bring in this thing so that they could cut the top and then boom, 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 rather than cut it and have it fall because it might fall on somebody's car or their house. And they leave all the wood laying around. And then around about 2 p.m, they bring in a wood chipper. Now, these are 3 really big trees. So we got 2 hours of stuff being thrown in the wood chipper yesterday. Then today, around 10 o'clock, they fire it up again for about 3 hours. I don't care if your windows are closed and your door's closed. If somebody is running a wood chipper less than 10 yards from your house, it's going to be annoyingly loud all the time they do it. I had work meetings where I was saying, can you hear all the noise next door? And they would say no, and it's good. But there were times when I would get calls and I could not hear the person, even though I would cup my ear and turn the volume all the way up and do everything I could because of the noise. And by the time it was done yesterday, when I got off work, I just had such a headache from it. And then today it started up again. And it was, oh my God, will this never end? And the thing was, the second time it went through my lunch, and usually over my lunch, I like to read comics. I couldn't read. I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't do anything other than just eat because it was so goddamn loud. I did get the Nova Omnibus. Joe, did you order the Nova Omnibus?
No, I decided to pass because I recall reading it and again, remember where I bought my first comic was like Spider-Man 178. So the crossover with Nova wasn't that far away, so I was able to pick it up. But I think a lot, like you said, the early issues were kind of fun. And then when Carmen Infantino came on, I was like, what the hell is this?
I've never seen a series fall apart so fast that still had the original creator on it, because Marv Wolfman created it and wrote it.
I got to run upstairs. Somebody's wandering around. So I'll be back in about 2 minutes.
A day and a half.
I'm going to get gas. That'll teach you.
So it starts off, you've got John Buscema drawing the origin issue because John Buscema drew a lot of first issues. If you go back and look at your mid-70s Marvel, the way they would do it is John Buscema would draw the origin issue, and then it would be passed off to the artist who would come next. And for Nova, the artist who came next was Sal Buscema, or Buscema. I don't know. But it was created by Marv Wolfman, and if you read the origin, it's very much a knockoff of Green Lantern. A dying alien gives his power to someone on Earth, except it's not, somebody who's the bravest or somebody who's this. It's Richard Rider, who's just an average teenage schmuck. He's not a good student. He's not a good athlete. He's not exceptionally smart. He's just average. And to me, that was what I liked about it, because everybody else, Peter Parker's a genius, Reed Richards is a genius, Tony Stark's a genius, everybody's a genius, everybody's the best at whatever. But it was nice to have a guy he's just kind of average. He's just kind of a dude. And, he was a guy with a couple of friends. He had a girlfriend. He dealt with crap in high school. The first 14 issues stay in sort of that realm, and Sal Buscema draws it, and it's very much a very likable 70s superhero book. You get Thor coming in issue 4. You have a Spider-Man crossover in issue 12. And then Sal Buscema leaves, and Carmine Infantino takes over the art. And this was during a time in Carmine Infantino's life where he did not want to do comics, and it showed. He could not have given less of a shit about his layouts and storytelling. But Marv Wolfman also lost his damn mind, and here's this average schmuck superhero who fights, he's fighting guys like Powerhouse and Diamond Head, and there's an ongoing story with the Sphinx who's behind all this stuff. But he's plunged into a war between S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Yellow Claw, a villain from the 50s that they brought back a couple of times. And through the whole story, reading it again, it's very much, it must be that Marv Wolfman wanted to tell this story and had nowhere else to tell it, because you could take Nova out of the story and it would not matter at all. They also ramp up the silliness by having Richard Rider's brother build a Sherlock Holmes robot who then becomes infected with the consciousness of the Dracula villain, Dr. Sun. None of this shit fits in the stories they were telling in the first batch of issues. And then we go into more detail on Nova's origin, where we've got this interstellar war going on, and the book is canceled with issue 25. And I can see why the book was canceled, because it very much was, okay, we've got this setting. Now we're going to put Nova in a story that he has nothing to do with and really mess up the idea that he's just kind of an average guy. And then we're going to have this big science fiction story. And they do go to the end of the science fiction story, which ends in the Fantastic Four and fits much better in the Fantastic Four than it did in Nova. And all I could think as I read it was, what a lost opportunity this was. And now Joe is not back yet, so I'm going to go into geeking.
I've been
Joe, what are you geeking on?
Oh, I got a couple things. I'm going to be fast about it. First of all, by the time we get together next week, I'll be talking a little bit about what I did at the new SpringCon done by the new MCBA group. Pat and I are setting up. We were at the MCBF's last con a couple weeks ago, and I didn't do as well, so I'm going to be blowing out stuff. I mention it because you all know we have the Facebook page, Crazy Comics and Stories Podcast, but I also set up a Facebook page for my e-band, Crazy Comics and Stuff. So you can go either to the Crazy page there or just go over to Crazy Comics and Stuff and like it, and I'll probably put a blurb on the Crazy Comics and Stories podcast Facebook page as well. So if you want to follow along what I'm doing, because I basically spent most of the day putting stuff on eBay, and I'm just having a blast doing it. A lot of good stuff. I took a few things off eBay, so if you've been eyeballing something and suddenly disappeared, it probably went to the MCBA con, and if it sold, it won't be coming back. But by the time this here podcast drops, stuff will be rolling on and on. We got what, one more podcast before Free Comic Book Day?
Yeah.
Woo! So that ought to be fun. I mentioned on our big 600th episode, a friend of mine, David Dersch, wrote a book, and he's got it at his website, daviddersch.com. If you're interested in getting an autograph copy, he has what they call the publisher copies. You have to contact him direct, either through his website or through his Facebook page. It's David Dersch, Doersch. So that's kind of cool. Who knows? Maybe someday I'll write a book. And just to round out, because I'm going to say 3 things I'm geeking on because I love to push. I got 2 more autograph things in the mail. I picked up a Kill Raven by Joe Linsner. This was back in 2001. He did a one-shot, which was a brilliant idea. I don't know how it's sold. I don't even know if you remember reading it, Cory, if you liked it or not. But I figured I've had Joe Linsner autograph stuff as well as a little tiny sketch of him doing Dawn. I figured of all the things he did, this would be the coolest one, I think, to have him. It's got the little autograph and the certificate on it as well. And then because I missed it, how do you say her name? Saran? Oh.
Sora Sung?
Thank you. Sora Sung. She had a big to-do at Chaos Comics where she did remarked editions. She appeared live if you could get to the headquarters. I missed out getting a remarked edition because I got the time zones mixed up. They sold out instantly. But I did pick up a publisher filer copy where what Chaos, I'm sorry, I say Chaos, it's Coffin now, coffincomics.com. And what they do is they make certain copies of a given edition, and then they allows them to review and to proof the printed work, and then they have extras standing by. Then they take the copies until the shipping cycle is done, replace any lost or damaged ones, they put them in the vault, and then they pop up. They show up in their mystery boxes, their mystery envelopes, and then in this case, they actually had a From the Vault pop up after they did this big event with Sora. And they had a publisher filed copies and actually had it autographed by both her and Brian Pulido. Pulido? So I have the Sora Sung Pearl edition. They only made 45 copies, and I sent her a quick note via the eBays or the Facebook saying, I didn't get a remark, but I got this. And she said, oh, that's cool. Mainly because it didn't come with a certificate saying she signed it. But if she'd have said, I didn't sign that, then I'd be like, hey, I paid a lot of money for this. So that's it. Cory, what you geeking on?
For the first time in a long time, I got a refund on my taxes. What does that have to do with comics? I have put it aside. That is my Free Comic Book Day stash.
Oh, I thought you'd spend it.
I
will be spending it.
Yes. Although I did buy one stupid thing. I always, when I get a cash windfall, I try to buy one stupid thing. Like when we all got the COVID check, that's when I became a Scottish lord. The one stupid thing I bought was an Amazon thing, the Luna controller. What it is a game controller that works on Wi-Fi, and you can use it to play games on Amazon, because if you're an Amazon Prime member, you get free games for your computer all the time, blah, blah, blah. So now I can play more video games with a controller. And the thing is, if I'm playing it on my PC and then hit pause, I can then go over to my TV, turn on my Amazon Fire Stick, and play it on there. It's silly, it's fun. But now I have a stash for Free Comic Book Day. So second thing I am geeking on, I got another omnibus with with my box day, and that was the Warlock omnibus. Now, I have been passing on a lot of these character-based omnibuses because they tend to hop around. Like the Phoenix one hops around here to there and here to there. And if I want to read the story, I'd rather have, okay, here are all the X-Men books, rather than, like I did pick up the Loki one when it was on deep discount, and boy, those Loki stories are all exactly the same. Something's happened to Odin. Thor's busy, so Loki takes over Asgard and starts to mess with Thor until Odin wakes up and tells Loki to quit it. Lather, rinse, repeat. But the Warlock one starts with the story in the Fantastic Four, goes over to when the character then appeared in Thor, then into his own series. And I had never read Warlock 1 through 8, which was the Roy Thomas, Gil Kane issues. And man, they are weird. The premise of it is that he goes to counter Earth, and Roy Thomas decides, okay, I'm going to retell the story of Jesus Christ using Warlock. So yeah, they're pretty weird. And then you get the Jim Starlin stuff. And it has all the tie-ins and everything, but it's basically that Jim Starlin story arc that starts with, Strange Tales 181, and then through the Warlock series, and then into Avengers Annual number 7, Marvel 2-in-1 Annual number 2, and then it does have the story from Marvel 2-in-1 where her decides she's going to reanimate Adam Warlock's dead body. So that's a really fun book. It was one that I was hemming and hawing about, but now that I've got it, I'm glad I've got it, because there's a lot of the early Warlock stuff I have just not read. I just never read it. Because Warlock, when I started reading comics, was one of those characters that, oh my gosh, everybody's got to have all the appearances. And the issues went crazy in price because of Jim Starlin. Believe it or not, kids, you've listened to us blather on about funny books for an hour and a half.
Cool.
And as we say every week, the comic we like the least, we still like better than the comic that you like the most. Joe?
Did I ever tell you why I got married?
No.
Oh, well, basically a witch cast me. She said if I didn't get married before turning 30, I would lose my hearing. The closer I came to 30, the more desperate I got. It was a wife or deaf situation. All right. Buttering nothing on Fox News. Go ahead. Hit my music.